last method is solving by elimination. Elimination, what we're going to do is we're going to combine the two equations, hopefully have an additive inverses amongst the y's, and get them to equal 0, so we have our quadratic equation that equals 0, and we can use one of our techniques to find the answer. So the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to organize it so that we have the y's lined up. Okay, so I'm going to take my two equations, and I'm going to start reordering them. Half of high school math is reordering equations. So I'm going to take a look, and I'm going to use additive, multiplicative inverse, whatever I have to do. Notice all we have is the minus 1 over here, so if I add 1 to both sides, I will have y isolated. Once y is isolated, I can use it as such. Over here, same thing. I have a minus x, so I'm going to add x, make 0. I'm going to do it to the other side to balance the equation. Giving me y equaling x plus 4. So now I have my equations organized in y equals form. You might be tempted to just use a transitive property and substitute instead of equal to each other. It's a good method. Elimination might strike you as something that you could do just as well. Okay, so I'm going to take my equations, I'm going to go back and relook at them in their specific form. So I'm going to take this equation, and I'm just going to organize it in a way that I'm more comfortable with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take y and use the symmetric property of equality, set that equal to x squared minus 7x plus 12, and this y over here, I'm going to rewrite it right below it. This helps me keep my thoughts organized so that when I add these two equations, the y's are lined up with the y's, the x's are lined up with the x's, everything's on the same side, we're all good. Now we'll notice that adding currently is not going to cause the y's to eliminate because they're not additive inverses. So I'm going to take the left and the right side of this bottom equation, make it negative, which makes it negative, negative, negative. Add the two equations up, the y's cancel out, making it 0. The x squared doesn't have anything to match with it, so x squared minus nothing is still x squared. Negative 7x minus x is negative 8x, and 12 minus 4 is 8. Now we have a quadratic equation. Once you have a quadratic equation, just go ahead and solve your quadratic equation. Using quadratic formula, using completing the square, whichever method you choose to use. Once you get your two solutions, you plug back in and you'll find your answers. Because this is even and this is 1, I'm going to use completing the square as my method. So because the c coefficient's not a perfect square, I'm going to move it over to both sides. Sorry, subtracting from both sides. Giving me this quadratic equation missing a c coefficient, in need of a c coefficient. It looks like that. Added my new c coefficient by taking half of 8, squaring it. Half of 8 squared is 4. 4 squared is 16, so I'm going to add 16. And to keep it balanced, I do it to both sides. I'm going to factor the left as x minus 4 times x minus 4, or x minus 4 squared, equaling 8. Take the square root of both sides. X minus 4 equals plus or minus 2 squared root of 2 over square root of 8 squared. Add 4 to both sides, and those are your two solutions. That is x equals 4 plus square root of 8, and x equals 4 minus square root of 8. Those are your exact answers. What you should do is just find decimal equivalent, 8 is going to be 2 point something. And you can go through and you can find those solutions. Or you can just go back to one of the original equations. If you remember, after we solved for y equaled x plus 4. So what you can do is you can take x, substitute it in for x, giving you when x is 4 plus 8, y is 4 plus 4 plus square root of 8, or 8 plus the square root of 8. And again, that solution doesn't make sense to you, but it's exact. So now we have 8 plus the square root of 8 and 4 plus the square root of 8. We would do the same thing over here for this solution. We plug it in when we get that other answer. It should be y equals 4 plus 4 is 8 minus the square root of 8. Giving us two solutions, right? We have a solution when x equals this, y equals this.